Welcome to the Bushy Brows podcast, where three guys who mostly get along dive into tough topics, challenge cherry-picked facts, and prove you don't have to agree on everything to have a great conversation. No punches pulled, no easy answers, just honest discussion with a side of humor. Let's get into it.
Hey everyone, this is Dave from the Bushy Brows podcast show. Every week Joe and Mike and I discuss issues in the news. We're three guys with opinions, but we also try to stay curious and open-minded. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, did you guys see the comments from the first episode show we did last week? Some of them I thought were pretty interesting. There was especially a comment from a person named Sean who really appreciated the fact that we could have intelligent conversation and can communicate things differently than what he had seen before. What do you think about that, Dave?
It's interesting. Three of us sit and talk about topics we're going to talk about in different shows. And maybe at the end of the day, this podcast, the value of it is not going to be less about the topics and more about three guys interacting without yelling and screaming at each other. I know you guys tease me a lot about storytelling, but in my opinion, a lot of people like stories. About 10 years ago, my wife and I were in south of Italy, in Puglia, in the heel of Italy, and we took this guided tour through this cavern system. And, I'm a fascinated guy by science and geology, so we're walking around this underground cave, and this woman who is a tour guide, obviously she's done this same tour 9 million times, in and out, in and out. You could tell she was just, going through the motions. Anyway, I stuck up my hand and asked a question. I said, are there a lot of earthquakes around here? And she said, what a stupid question that is. Do you think I'd work here if there were earthquakes? And that was her response to my question. And the reason I'm bringing this up is Sean was talking about us being able to communicate. So she communicated with me by shooting me down, insulting me, and insulting my question. And just this morning, Mike, I was watching TV and there's a show in Italy and they were talking about the Apennine Mountains that run down the spine of Italy. And the part of Italy we were at is way off the fault line. So they haven't had an earthquake in Italy in that area in thousands of years. That's what she should have told me. She should have said something like, hey, that's a good question. So let me tell you where we are in Italy and where all the earthquakes are. So I guess my question is, why do people feel the need to shoot people down and insult them? I don't know if either of you have a take on this, because it seems the internet's just full of this stuff.
Dave, what I think we need to keep in mind is maybe this poor woman had just endured an hour-long tour where somebody asked her the stupidest questions over and over and over again just to get her goat. So maybe she brought something to that conversation that you had nothing to do with.
I think for a lot of people, maybe we're encouraged by social media, to win at all costs. It's, there's going to be a winner and a loser out of every conversation. And I see that a lot. Personally, I get a little bored when people start name calling because I just find it predictable. And I understand why they're doing it. It's shorthand, right? It's just lazy. Call somebody a name or call their group a name and you can laugh it off. But to me, that's not winning. But your point, Mike, is an interesting one. I will tell you, on that way back from that tour, we reached the end and walked back through that underground cavern. She said to us, now your perspective will change on the way back. Yeah, it changed. You know why? Because she was running 5 times as fast on the way back. She was like the horse heading back for the stable to get her oats. So, per your point, I think she'd done that job too many times. I think her incentives weren't set up. She wasn't going to get any tips or any kind of additional bonuses based on how happy we were. She was just going through the motions. That's how it came across. You had a employee paid a standard wage who get paid whether we're happy or not. She's not getting tips. And that's basically how she ends up.
A lot of people sometimes, that was your first tour of the day, right, Dave?
Yeah.
But that might have been her 37th. And when you have dealt with the same questions I'm not saying that you ask the same questions, but when you've dealt with questions repeatedly and you're not necessarily happy with your job or the younger generation too. Also, I've seen they have more of the internet mentality where they just feel more free to say things that normally you wouldn't have said in real life, because they haven't made that disconnect between online and real life, right? Yeah, those are the kind of comments that come out. I agree with you. I agree with Mike about sometimes when people aren't happy, they just don't really handle the situation correctly. I don't even know if she even realized she wasn't handling it correctly. That's the point that probably needs to be made, because we were taught different in our generation as the next generation was taught, and the next generation will be taught different again. And it wasn't okay for me to have a mohawk when I was a kid. Even though as an 8-year-old boy, I wanted the mohawk, right? My mom wasn't going to let me have the mohawk because that was not a good haircut, and that's not what respectable boys have. And to me, I don't know. I probably saw it on a movie or something. I was like, yeah, I want that. I didn't really understand. My parents really didn't care for some of my music tastes or the clothes that I wanted to wear, just like their parents probably didn't care for their music taste and the clothes that they wanted to wear. As a parent, I can tell you there were many times where my kids would walk out and I would look at them like wearing something. I'd be like, no, you're not wearing that out in public, or, it's because, that's how it goes. Yeah.
But I've had teachers who, you talked about in the military is that term short timer. Somebody who's done their, tour and they only got a few weeks or a couple of months left before they can get out. I've seen people, at the end of their careers, and they're still patient, they're still kind, they're still good listeners. Take the school teacher. She's taught the third grade for 30 years and it's her last class. She's still a great teacher. And then you have other teachers who are short timers who are becoming increasingly, short with people, intolerant with people, jaded, bitter. So how come some people go one route and the other people go the other route?
Maybe it has to do with if they enjoy what they're doing. I do this thing. I picked it up from my ex-wife. Taught me from Mary Kay. Taught me sales. And Dave, I'm sure you've done this in your background. This warm chatter thing, where you get a person at Wendy's who is heads down. Just get the orders. Just get the money. Get the food. And now there's like a line out the door, and they're just like they're frazzled, and they're just being treated like a cog in the machine. And sometimes you can pop somebody out of that by saying something like, I really like your hat. That's a great sports team. And or even, hey, you're doing a great job. Take a deep breath. Let's just enjoy this moment, and then we can do the order. And it's a little creepy. It's a little weird. But sometimes you can really pull people out of their robotic self. They're not a cog anymore. And, so maybe the correct response to this lady later was, what is the dumbest question you've ever been asked? Was it mine? And maybe take this person out of that situation where I walk people, I say the same thing every day. And these people are intolerable. I don't like foreigners, perhaps, because you're a crazy American. In her mind, she probably didn't know you're Canadian, unless you're.
Well, you're gonna laugh because about half an hour after that question, we're heading back, at a running pace. And I'm right behind her, and I said, so what's the dumbest question somebody's ever asked you? And she turned around, she goes, another stupid question from you? And I'm like, okay, that's it for me.
Brilliant.
I know a lot of this is role modeling by, parents or leaders. I owned a scuba diving store in my 20s. And I used to tell my instructors, look, one day you're going to show up and you're going to be in a bad mood, or your dog got run over by a car, or your girlfriend left you, or your boyfriend left you, or something's going on in your life that just makes you foul. If that's going on and you can't suck it up and you're going to, dump on the customers, you call me and I will teach your class for you. Because we're a business here and we don't take out our personal stuff on our customers. Otherwise, I'm going to be out of business. So that was a guideline I used to give to people. And maybe more people need to hear that guideline.
What I like that you just said there is you didn't say this is not acceptable behavior. You said, understand where you're coming from. And I understand that these days happen, these things happen, and we'll recover from this as a team because there's more than one of us. So, Joe, we had a conversation a couple days ago about how each one of us has a different way of communicating. Nothing makes that more apparent than to actually get yourself on recording and then listen back and say, man, I don't like my voice, which I don't. Even though some people say they do, I don't. I did want to, get your take on what your communication style is. Self-identify that.
My communication style is I try to be consistent first and foremost. It's one of the things that the military taught me. Consistency is everything, especially with communication and interactions with other people. I also try to look at other people's perspectives, not just mine. It is hard to do that, because to me, in my perception of the world, I'm the center of the universe, right? So I have to get outside that box a little bit and look at stuff in a different manner, and then really try to be more understanding. I also have a rule that I like to use, and I can't remember the exact source where I heard this, but it is not mine that I've created. But we have two ears and one mouth, so sometimes it's better to listen twice as much as you talk. And that has served me well, usually when I remember it. What about you, Dave?
Well, my background is sales, and there's an occupational hazard in sales because sales is the art of persuasion. So generally, people go into sales tend to be people who like to talk or like to interact with other people. Maybe that's a better way to put it. So I'm like you. The thing I always have to keep in mind is, speak with the intention to listen, not speak with the intention to keep speaking, because I can talk over top of everybody. But, there's that old maxim in sales, selling isn't telling. And too often you can talk yourself out of anything if you could just keep on talking. So I've made it a study to try and develop questions like you were talking about earlier, Mike, that soft question where you say, hey, I really like your hat, or, well, are those new shoes? And just shut up and let the other person talk a little bit. Yeah.
My way that I communicate is I filibuster. I just get out there and I start talking and I keep talking. I've been in 600 corporate meetings, thousands maybe of corporate meetings where I ran the meeting, and sometimes you get people that just sit back and listen and don't participate, and that causes me to over participate. So one of the things that I'm working on with this group, honestly, and in life, is to spend more time listening and not filibuster and not. When you were talking, Dave, I was listening to you, of course, but I was thinking about, I've spent a lot of time coaching soccer teams in my youth. And as I coach them, the coach tells you what to do, you do it. I wonder if I ever asked anybody, what were you thinking when you did that? And listened and, understood, oh, you were tired and you didn't want to go there, even though I'm yelling at you to go there. Maybe that means we need to spend more time on cardio or fitness. And so as a coach sometimes, and as a leader, and like I'm not presently, I tend to overtalk, and I think I might almost be doing it right now.
One of the things that I keep hearing from both Mike and Dave, especially during the shooting this episode, is talking about being nice to people and giving comments about random things. Commenting about, hey, I like your sweater, or hey, you did a really good job with that presentation, or whatever else that they can do. I actually have spent a lot of time in my personal life doing this, and I call it planting seeds. And what I do is when I see somebody at the checkout, I'll comment something nice, especially if I see that they're not having such a great day. Maybe it's Christmas rush and they've just checked out 30 people that weren't probably the most personable people, and they just want to get to their break and they're having a rough time. And then I get up there and I say something like, "Hey, that's a really cool pin that you have on your sweater," you know, and just give them a little compliment, make sure it's not a creepy compliment. You don't want to tell them that, oh, smile for me or something like that. Be professional and courteous, but give them a little compliment, plant that seed. And sometimes that seed will grow, sometimes it won't. But sometimes that seed will grow and they'll be in a better mood, and that mood will touch the next 20 customers that go through their line, and it's infectious. And that stuff is what we need to do in society. And I just wanted to touch a little bit about that because that's important. And thank you guys.
I'm going to shoot that over to Dave because I know Dave has how to meet strangers steps. And we've talked about this before, and I've used it to great effect. And Dave, it kind of goes like, make a comment, make a compliment, but don't say like nice legs. But actually, make a compliment about maybe a personal choice or a style choice. And then perhaps drag it back to you. Hey, I went there. That was a great college. And go ahead, Dave. You've put it together a couple times in discussions. And
I'm really impressed that you've got it. It's stuck. So unlike you two, I don't have kids, so I like to consider both of you my children. So if you're learning from me, see, my legacy passes on another generation. So, no, I've used something in my keynotes for years because I go into large companies and corporations where sales hates marketing, marketing hates IT, nobody likes HR, and everybody hates head office. It's kind of like Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard. They don't get along. So they bring me in to talk about, how to act like good guys and how to talk to people outside your group, your tribe. So I use this acronym called Watch Your Weekend Challenge. And watch means, look at somebody's watch and say, hey, I like your watch. In other words, watch means pay somebody a sincere compliment. And but it's a compliment, something they earn, not something they were born with. So you'd say, I like your shoes. You don't say, I like your legs. So the first one's a compliment. Second one's an HR complaint, or as Joe would say, a creepy comment. And nobody needs a creepy customer at the cash. So so watch, weekend. You look for something you have in common with them. What do you do when you're not a cashier? What do you do for fun on weekends? What do you do when you're not on duty? And then last one's the most interesting one, which is watch your weekend challenges. So what's the hardest thing about being a cashier? I've used that many, many times with the cashiers. You want to see somebody open up to you? They'll tell you the hardest thing about being a cashier. And that actually gives you a lot of information, gives you some empathy. You can understand, as both you guys have been saying, that maybe it's your first interaction that day, but they've had 300 interactions already, good, bad, and ugly. So watch your weekend challenge. It's a simple acronym, and I've taught it a lot.
I did that once at I think I was checking out at a truck stop, and there was a woman there with a conspicuous hat. It was a stocking hat. It was not a toque. Toque. Oh yeah, thank you. It was a hat, and I asked her, I'm like, I like your hat. It looks very warm. And she said, it was my mom's. I lost her. I don't know, but basically, I didn't want to bring this down. But the point is, she was wearing the hat because she wanted to be noticed, and by picking that out and by saying, I think I said, I like your hat. It looks really warm. I'm from a warm place, but now this is a cold environment, and so I kind of tend to wear hats too. And perhaps because I don't have much hair. But it's interesting because I love snapping people out of that robotic thing and getting them more into a personal conversation thing, even for just a minute. And then she's going back to being truck stop, yell at people, 20 on pump 5, maybe 40.
Yeah, just remember my wife's guideline. She's got a great piece of advice for everybody listening to this podcast, for all the guys out there, who want to make more friends. My wife says, you can talk to anybody you want, but don't go to creepytown. Because once a woman's stamped your passport, it's really hard to get out of that town. So this bit about smile, give us a smile. No, don't do that. Don't do that, right? Per your point, her mother could have died the week before, and you're that guy grinning at her going, smile, man, smile. So you never know what's going on in somebody else's life.
Yeah. That just sounds more like a command than a request too, and it doesn't have I know that a lot of people probably say that meaning it well, but it's usually never taken well. So as long as we understand that, we can maybe pick a different thing to use to get our point across.
If you want to get somebody to smile, what Gandhi say? Be the change you want to see in the world. Smile yourself.
I'm pretty sure Gandhi would have told him a dad joke.
I don't think he was a dad. Now I need to look. I need to ask Siri later.
So, Joe, answer me a question. How come a guy, and I don't own a Dodge Ram, I don't own a pickup truck, but I got a father who's been a car guy his whole life. He would never even let a fleck of rust appear on a vehicle. Even 10 years old, he'd have that thing sanded down, buffed down, repainted, everything. If that vehicle was running rough, he'd have that engine tuned like a top. How come a guy will take care of his vehicle so well and make sure it's got decent fuel to it and make sure it's pristine and, keep it in the garage, out of the weather. And yet your body, which is the most amazing engine there is, if you're running rough, either physically or mentally, he won't see anybody about it. Why is that?
Because guys are stubborn and we value our cars and our materialistic items more times than not, more than what we value ourselves and our own physical. As long as we're healthy enough to do the things that we want to do, we don't really give it much thought after that, right? And really most men don't give it much thought until their health is bad enough to where they can't do what they want to do. You hear the term, he's only going to the doctors when he's dying term so often. And that's one of the reasons why. Also, the car is for them, right? That is there for them. Their body, even though it is there for them, they don't really look at it that way. A lot of people don't. So, they want a nice car, but they're not really thinking about, I need a haircut. Some guys do. It just depends. I also want to point out the fact that a lot of times when you see people that don't take care of themselves maybe in the ways that they should, but they take care of their materialistic stuff, that's usually a pretty good indication that there's some depression going on. Maybe they just need a friend, ask them, everything all right? Like, what's going on? Because most men aren't going to ask for help, and that, whether it be fixing the yard or talking about their problems.
What do you think it's upbringing too? I mean, I read an essay one time they were talking about this animal behavioral expert, and she said in chimp society, she was talking about chimpanzees, if a female chimp shows distress, like she's in pain, she'll be supported by the other female chimpanzees. They'll gather together, they'll support her. But if a male chimpanzee shows pain, he'll get jumped on and beat up by the other males.
Yep.
And so I wonder, she was speculating, does this apply to humans? I mean, I remember as a boy, I'm of a certain age now, but when I grew up, it's don't be a sissy, don't be a girl, don't cry. Only girls cry. So I don't know if it's nature or nurture, but as a young man, I was socialized that, you should be ashamed if you cry or if you ask for help.
I don't think that you should be ashamed if you cry or if you ask for help. The problem that we still have in society right now, though, is we have not come far enough along to make it safe for guys to or for guys to feel safe to talk about their problems. We have commercials and people on TV and YouTube and all this telling guys that it's okay, and we have UFC fighters, talking about please talk to people if you're feeling down. But the problem is usually when people do talk to people and it ends up becoming a negative in the long run, and it just reaffirms everything that they've thought over why we don't talk to people. We really need to get both sides of that straightened out to where people can feel safe to talk to people again.
Life's been dealing me a couple bad cards lately, and I've had a rough couple weeks. And I had a good cry a couple days ago. That being said, I think also what society expects from men is different than really maybe what it should be. A year ago, 14 months ago, I moved, I don't know, 750 miles, and all my stuff moved with me. Every other time I've moved, I've either had a company move me, or I've just had amazing energy, or maybe I blacked out on how much work I did. This time, I found it really hard to ask for help. And guys typically don't ask for help. They're the guys people ask for help. And that's something I'm working on a lot, which is, being able to ask for help. And I just want to bring one more thing to the conversation. I've moved out of houses about 4 times, maybe 5 times. And at the end, I always make the house good. I fix the dishwasher. I make that light work. I paint the walls. And then when I leave, I'm disappointed, because I realized at that point that was money spent that never got enjoyed. And I feel like people treat their bodies that way too. It's like, you could have been enjoying this, being healthy all along, but now it's too late, and you're interested in health. And I'm making these health choices because I have high blood pressure, not because, wouldn't it be amazing if I could still rock climb at age 60? And which it would be amazing if I could do that. I don't think so. But anyway, so I think society has put pressures on men, and I think we put pressures on ourselves. And it's a very interesting thing to look at, to say, where can I change in order to help myself mentally, help physical health? I know that Dave has done some physical changes for his physical health, and that's really had an impact on his life.
Yeah, I'll tell you guys something interesting. Any guy listening to this podcast may smile, but I made one really smart move in my life, and that is almost 30 years ago. I married a woman who was very goal-driven and very determined to kind of move ahead in life. So, she always says, if you want to run fast, you got to run with people faster than you. Now, I've got my own strengths. I can walk into any room and strike up a conversation. I love to teach, and I've taught many sports, but my wife is definitely the goal-driven one in our family, and she's responsible for a lot of the success we've had in terms of financial success and the way our lives have gone. And the reason I'm bringing this up is that 10 years ago, my wife said, I think we should ditch meat and dairy. And I went, what? She goes, yeah. She said, I think I've read a lot about the impact of meat and dairy on the body, and I'm starting getting pain in my hands and knuckles. And I think I'd like to just try going vegan. And of course, I'm the meat and potatoes guy, right? Like a lot of guys are. And I said, I'm thinking of my life full of salads and no hamburgers and anything from now on. And I said, I don't know if I want to do this. She goes, oh, you don't have to. I'm going to do it on my own. I went, well, if you're going to do it, I'll do it with you, because, we do a lot of things together. Now, this is interesting. I put on social media that I was going to try ditching the meat and dairy and just going plant-based. Almost every comment that came on my Facebook wall from a woman was either curious or supportive. Okay, they're all about what kind of recipes are you thinking of? Oh, I've thought of trying that myself. How are you going to get your protein? Lots of questions. Almost every comment from a guy was either dismissive or insulting. I got a lot of buddies on social media, but they're like, send me over your steaks, or, real men eat cows. But at the same time, 3 guys sent me private notes on Messenger saying, I got a lot of health problems. Do you think this would help me too? But here's the interesting part. They didn't put it on my Facebook wall. They didn't share it in front of women and with other guys. They sent it privately. And I just think it reinforced what we've been all talking about today, which is a lot of guys have issues too. It's just they feel really uncomfortable sharing that in an open forum.
Yeah. How do we get that to change? What's the steps that we need to take as a society to make sure that we can change that? What do you think, Mike?
Be the change.
Be the change.
When somebody reaches out to you, when you have a close relationship with another man, you can say, you can bring things to me. It's all right. When you raise your son, you can point out the fact that I pointed out the fact to my son, I really wish I would have asked for help much quicker, much more ahead of time, so that I could have done. In the past, I've done this on my own, these moves or whatever. But raise your raise your children without those pressures, and try to counteract the pressures from movies, media, everything that they get. We get these role models, and these role models are then how we determine our own pressures that we put on ourselves, right? And this is a thing. It's always going to be pressures. There's always going to be pressures for the man to be stoic. There's always going to be pressures for the girl to be pretty. You can't get away from that, and all the things, the images, the movies, whatever we ingest. But you can be a voice out there saying, it's okay to come to me with a problem. It's okay to ask for help. I would love for you to ask for help. And then when you do get asked for help, instead of saying, man up, do it yourself, when your son asks for help, you can say, I want to do this because I want to, not because you asked me. That's important for me to give that support. And I think more and more of us, if we do that, we can, I don't know. We're never going to change the entire wind, but maybe we can hold up a fan to it in the other direction and push it the other way. Dave, what do you think?
Yeah, here's a cautionary tale. I had something pretty ugly happen to me about a year and a half ago. I'm not going to reveal it on this podcast show, maybe in the future, but it's something that impacted me physically and mentally. And, I got a pretty large social media profile, and I don't want to just go online and spill my guts. So I reached out to 3 or 4 people, a couple in the family and a couple of buddies of mine, and just said, can I have a conversation with you? I just need to talk this out. And one of the guys just made a joke about it. And I said, no, I got to talk about this. But he just insisted on treating it like a joke. And that friendship's pretty well over now. Now, am I mad at the guy? I was initially, but then I thought he probably just doesn't have the tools to deal with something like this. And but it didn't impact our friendship because I thought, much as I like kidding around with the guy, I think it was a big compliment for me to open myself up and ask him just to listen and let me talk about this stuff. And he didn't want to do it. It could have been that he was trying to protect himself, or maybe his idea of the friendship was different than ours. So there is always a hazard sometimes when you open up to somebody that, you got to ask permission, and you may accept the fact that they either don't want to or don't have the tools to deal with it.
Yeah.
And look, Alcoholics Anonymous does a pretty good job with what the 3 of us are talking about right now. They've had the buddy system for years. So if somebody's getting weak and they need a drink, they got their buddy, and they call their buddy up and they go, I'm getting weak, man. Then their buddy drives over there. Right? And I think that's something a lot of people can respond very favorably to, which is you'll let yourself down, but you often won't let somebody else down. So I would suggest that maybe people listen to this podcast, find somebody you like and trust and just say, what, can I share some stuff with you? I just need to be able to talk to somebody.
The other thing that we need to remember when we're dealing with these situations, especially if a friend does reach out to you and wants to talk to you about some stuff that maybe is sensitive in nature, first and foremost, if that is not something that you want to do, you should let them know right away, so that, for whatever reason, just be honest with them. If you're honest with them, they'll probably be more receptive to the honesty than talking to you for an hour when it doesn't really help them. Secondly, if you do decide to talk to your friends and you're a guy and your friends are telling you about issues, the first thing that you do is you don't ever bring that back up again. Once you're done with that conversation, like that, as far as you're concerned, that's locked away in the safe. And that's one of the reasons why guys don't talk to people about that, is because 2 months later, it comes up in a poker game, or 3 months later, it comes up during fantasy football, or a year and a half later, someone says something to them that got back to, whoever, because someone else said something to someone else. And then it just reaffirms in that person's head, this is why we don't talk. No, you have to talk about stuff sometimes. And you have to find the appropriate people to talk about. But if someone does talk to you about these things, as soon as you're done with that conversation, just lock it away in the vault, never to be. If they bring it back up to you, all right, you can get it back out of the vault and talk. But just put it in the vault. If you care about that person, put it in the vault. Don't ever bring it up. Don't ever talk about it. Don't ever try to use it as power over them, right? Because we, as guys, seem to sometimes have that tendency. I'm pretty sure that that's genetic. But yeah, just help them out, be a friend. Like maybe someday they'll be able to do the same back for you. And if we do more of that and we show people that we can do that and talk to each other about that without fear of ridicule or people talking about it, then that's how I think we fix it. There's a really smart guy that I know who talks about this in his talks. I believe it's called Third Gear, right, Dave?
Yeah, well, third gear, is really about doing the right thing, having the other person's best interest at heart. And, Joe, you'd asked earlier about communication styles. I grew up in a sarcastic family. So the way we expressed love was through sarcasm and humor and putting other people down. And a lot of guys can relate to that, being a smartass. But when my mom was dying of breast cancer, her best friend called me up and she said, "Now, I know you're going to go over and you're going to sit beside your mom. I know what you're going to try and do. You're going to try and make her laugh. You're going to try and make her smile. You're going to tell jokes." She said, "That's not what your mother needs right now. She wants you to listen to her. So you sit next to her, you hold her hand, and you just listen and let her talk." And I never forgot that lesson, because there's a language of guys that we use that makes us very comfortable with other guys, and it's the way we show guy love to one another, but it's not always applicable in every situation.
Yeah. Very well said.
So guys, let's go around the room and let's finish the podcast like this. Everybody talk about one thing that stuck to your head. If somebody talks to you a couple of days from now, you're taken away from this podcast. I'll start. It was when Mike basically admitted on the podcast he cried. He had a good cry a couple of days ago. It's not usually what you hear guys say, especially when who knows can be listening. So I was impressed with his honesty. That's my biggest takeaway from this podcast show.
Isn't it interesting that when you cry as a man, you might want to hide it instead of own it? We need to be better men at listening, at understanding, at not ridiculing, and getting out of the sarcasm. And that's how we can change society, one son, one friend at a time. And those changes are huge. So I really liked our discussions about how we can assist each other with mental health, how we can relate to each other. That's my takeaway. Joe, what did you think about today?
One of the things that sticks out in my mind is the story that Dave talked about with his friend with the unfortunate circumstance and not knowing how to talk, and it really showed me a side of Dave where he later on is saying he's not mad at that person, and he maybe understands that they didn't have the tools or the know how to communicate properly in that situation. And again, I think it's important that we remember and see things from other people's perspective as our own, so that we can not throw away relationships or get mad at people when maybe we just ask too much or pick the wrong person to ask.
You've been listening to the Bushy Brows podcast. Look for new episodes every Monday morning. Check us out and join in on the conversation on Facebook, TikTok, our website, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks for joining the conversation. Catch you next time.
Where'd you do your boot camp, Joe?
I did my boot camp at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Was your DI good guy? You should have a bunch of them.
I had a bunch of DIs. I had 3 drill instructors. The first one was DI Morales, and he was what we like to call short timing because he was right at the end of his DI tour. So he was not the meanest guy, put it that way. Uh, he was just trying to get that last 3 months out.
Oh,
And then
interesting.
I had another drill instructor by the name of Drill Sergeant Mott. And this guy was an interesting fellow, my friend. He was about a 6'3" Texan who always had the plug of chew in his lip,
Oh, yeah.
and talked real rough. Of course, I have the living so close to Canada. I have the Canadian accent, right? So everybody always, where are you from? So,
From
but he had that thick Texas accent, right?
Nice.
And I remember the first time I had to go see him. You have to do your movements where you walk, you have to knock, drill sergeant, so and so request permission to enter, yada yada, and do the whole rigmarole,
Yeah.
right? So I get in, and as I'm walking this way, the entire wall that I'm walking towards before I do my facing movement is nothing but martial arts trophies from all the different martial arts competitions he had been in and
Oh,
won.
yeah. Yeah.
So, like, right off the bat, you knew this guy was like a badass, right? And then as soon as I got, stand in front of his desk and did my movement and I did that, the entire wall behind him was all of his PBR trophies because
Yeah.
apparently he was on the Pro Bowl circuit for years as well. So, all right, so I have a bull riding ninja as a drill instructor. I'm not going to piss this guy out. And that was my first thought. And he would do things. When you looked at him, you didn't really think that he was this agile guy, right? Because he's just like,
Yeah.
250-pound Texan. Uh, but he would do things every once in a while, like jump up and kick stuff that was like 7 foot up in the air, and stuff like that. So you knew not to mess with him. I will say this though, he was the drill instructor that if you got caught doing some bad stuff, he would make you regret life for the entire day. But if he was making you regret life, you knew damn well why it was a justified, like he was fair with it.
Yeah.
It's weird. I'm trying to think of what it would be either, and I'm drawing blanks.